just looked like clouds all of a sudden just starting to get sucked up in the air, and then pretty soon they started coming around this way. And I told my kids, I said, get down in the basement.
I saw the trees, leaves and branches flying everywhere, so I just stuck my head. 5 seconds later, the house just flipped over twice.
40 years ago tomorrow, western Pennsylvania endured one of the worst tornado outbreaks to ever hit this area. It was May 31st, 1985. More than 40 tornadoes touched down in Ohio, Pennsylvania, and up into Canada, killing dozens of people. KDKA First Alert meteorologist Trey Fulbright looks back now at the outbreak and the weather setup that allowed it to happen.
May 31st marks 40 years since one of the largest and worst tornado outbreaks in the Great Lakes and Upper Ohio Valley region. On May 31st, 1985, a total of 43 tornadoes struck Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Ontario, with 21 of them hitting here in Pennsylvania.
The tornadoes we had, of course, in western Pennsylvania were most severe, and I doubt this will ever happen again in our lifetimes.
The worst included 4 F3 tornadoes, including one that tracked 39 miles through Beaver and Butler counties, 4 F4 tornadoes to the north in Crawford, Erie, Forest, Mercer, and Venango counties, and the strongest and deadliest tornado of the outbreak was an F5 that tracked from Ravenna, Ohio, 47 miles to Wheatland and Mercer County.
That wide swath of destruction is also visible here on the ground in Forest County, particularly near the small village of Star. Star, like Albion and many other communities, is virtually gone.
And I can see the black wall coming up. And I went into the basement. And that's my house out here.
You're going to rebuild?
Not here.
According to the National Weather Service, the outbreak killed 89 people in multiple states and Canada, injured more than 1,000, and caused $600 million in damage.
Framed by a path of destruction, it's almost as if the twister took aim for the church itself.
We're just going to raise that church up again, and it's going to be there, and then we're just going to be in that place and praise the Lord.
How did such a violent outbreak occur? An unseasonably hot and humid air mass flowed northeast from the south during the morning and midday hours of May 31st. This fuel was able to keep building through the afternoon because of a strong cap or lid of warm and dry air in the middle of the atmosphere. By early evening, the cap ferociously broke as a strong cold front and jet stream winds moved in from the west, resulting in rotating storms that produced dozens of strong to violent tornadoes.
Absolutely incredible to see how that happened and what made it up. And Trey, you know, I think it was the 10th or 20th anniversary I was up in that area and talking to people, and probably today too, it is as if it just happened.
Right, and I got to talk to a lot of people as well in Venango County, and they remember it very well. I learned a lot, and it was truly an incredible story to put together and learn a lot from this.
This is the story of one of the deadliest weekends in western Pennsylvania history.
Just people buried alive everywhere, screaming and hollering for help.
We got about 3 neighbors that are dead.
There were 3 people killed across the road here. Their cars laying up here in the field.
I saw a lot, more than I ever want to see again. A lot of death.
I know my wife saved my son's life. There's no question about it.
And she threw my mother down, jumped on top of my mother. She saved my mom.
She saved your mom, but she gave her own life?
Yes. Yeah, she did.
Among the grief, among the devastation, groups of people are rolling up their sleeves and rebuilding what was destroyed.
That's everything I had. I built it. And it's gone.
You know, we lost everything.
We ain't got nothing here. Everybody from over there, stuff's over here.
We'll start over again. They take a while.
So I'm sure it'll change our lives.
Yes, and change lives it certainly did. A lot of emotions there on that day, May 31st, 1985, 40 years ago tomorrow. One of the largest and deadliest tornado outbreaks this area has ever seen.
43 tornadoes touched down from Ohio into Pennsylvania and north to Canada. Half of them hit right here in western PA. 89 people were killed and more than 1,000 were hurt. And now, as we mark 40 years, we're remembering the victims, the survivors, and the resilience of so many local communities that endured and overcame.
Here's KDKA First Alert meteorologist Trey Fulbright with the first part of our look back.
We had a very good idea that 24 hours in advance, that the next day, May 31st, 1985, would be an outbreak of severe weather, strong thunderstorms and tornadoes. And so I actually was comfortable using the tornado word one day in advance.
But on the heels of the warm air comes the cold front tomorrow night, and we have a classic situation that could result in a few tornado sightings.
That's retired KDKA meteorologist Dennis Bowman. Back in 1985, he was working at WPXI. He vividly remembers forecasting the outbreak and broadcasting the warnings as the tornadoes rolled in.
I was doing the evening primetime weathercasts, and things were quiet. It was warm, very humid, sticky day, but things didn't get rocking and rolling much during the daylight hours. It was more in the early evening is when things began to kick off to our north and west. The reports they started to trickle in about heavy damage, and it was a day that we'll never forget.
Dennis says the technology to forecast and track storms between 1985 and today has vastly improved.
The radar that I was using on May 31st, 1985 was the WSR 57 radar, which stands for Weather Service Radar 57, meaning 1957 technology. We used that for 30 years, up until the next rad, what they called it, the next generation of Doppler radars came out.
Retired KDKA anchor and reporter Paul Martino also played an instrumental role in covering the tornado outbreak and its aftermath.
Early the next morning, I headed up to Albion, small city up north, which was virtually wiped out.
This is all that remains of a medical center in the middle of town. It too will have to be replaced.
As I arrived, people were just emerging from shelters or wherever they were, standing in disbelief to see their home just a pile of rubble. I think she was a 16-year-old young girl who came up to us crying and stated, "Albion's gone." And that encapsulated the moment it was gone. It was probably one of the worst things I saw in 50 years of broadcasting.
But even amid tragedy, Paul recalls survivors still found it possible to embrace a lighter moment.
We're shooting these people sifting through the rubble, and this woman shouts to her neighbor,
"Hey, Bob, get your roof out of my yard!"
"Hey, Bob, get your roof out of my yard." So even in a horrible moment like that, some people can find humor, and it helped. It helped lighten the load a little bit.
Among other things, the 1985 outbreak prompted changes in the way severe weather is covered and how local media works to keep you informed and safe.
Back in those days, if you had a tornado warning, you would jump on air, interrupt programming, you'd give the warning, and then when you were done with your information, we went back into programming while there was a tornado warning in progress. Nowadays, we don't do, we learned that you got to go on and you got to stay on. And because, you know, it doesn't do any good to do a tornado warning for 5 minutes and get off the air, and then somebody else just now turns their TV on and they missed it.
Listen to what the experts are saying and don't take it lightly. And I'm sorry if your program got interrupted, but we're talking about people's lives.
Ralph Ionati is up in Big Beaver Borough in Beaver County right now, where that tornado has the death toll mounting. Ralph, what's the story?
Well, Ray, we have a disaster on our hands tonight in Big Beaver Borough. I'm standing in front of what was a shopping center.
May 31st, 1985, a night many in Western PA will never forget. More than 20 tornadoes touched down here, part of a larger outbreak from Ohio into Canada. One of them, an F3, carved a nearly 40-mile path through Beaver and Butler counties.
This was the ticket booth at the Spotlight 88 drive-in. What's left of the ticket booth was found in those trees back there.
The Big Beaver shopping plaza took a direct hit from that tornado. It was destroyed.
And as we mark 40 years since the 85 tornado outbreak, KDKA First Alert meteorologist Trey Fulbright continues our look back with a trip to Big Beaver to talk to a man who was at the plaza that afternoon and survived.
I'm meteorologist Trey Fulbright at the Big Beaver shopping plaza north of Beaver Falls. This was the site of an F3 tornado on this date in 1985. I met with Mike Romai, talk show host at WBVP Radio, to learn more about how he narrowly escaped the tornado while running errands here on that day.
I was going to get a haircut. There's a place in the Big Beaver Plaza, it was called Zodiac Hairstylist. And so I just stopped in to get a haircut. And so it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon and nothing was going on. I had a little bit of a wait, and then I got my haircut. My brother-in-law was with me, and we got our haircuts there. As we were leaving the hairstylist, you could see the hillside. It was getting really dark. Now, this was a warm afternoon. It was a hot, warm afternoon, and there wasn't any sign of anything happening. In Beaver County, we didn't think about it. Tornadoes don't hit here. That's what we always were told. We're protected by the hillsides, so we don't have to worry about that sort of thing.
But on that Friday night 40 years ago, that myth was proven false as a powerful F3 tornado tore a 39-mile-long path across Beaver and Butler counties from Big Beaver to Sarver, injuring 120 people and killing 9.
The trees started to shift and they started to blow, and they were really blowing. And all of a sudden, to me, and I've always explained it this way, it seemed like celery in a Vegematic. The trees were just uprooting, and they were, just circling and flowing in all different directions. So I make a right onto Route 18 North, and as we're going just feet from the exit, we could see the tornado started to come across the highway. My Bonneville at the time, it was shaking, it was rattling, and my brother-in-law said, just keep going, don't slow down, just because it was pulling us in all different directions.
The tornado crossed the highway and the Beaver River into North Sewickley, while Mike and his brother-in-law made it safely to his brother-in-law's house, where both of their wives were sheltered. After exchanging accounts, the four headed back to the shopping plaza to find it destroyed by the tornado.
When firefighters arrived on the scene, the first thing they did was conduct an initial sweep through this entire complex, looking for anybody who might be still trapped under the rubble.
The emergency vehicles were there, the James Way shopping plaza, it was just demolished. We found out later on that a couple people had died.
The Big Beaver Plaza was eventually rebuilt and life got back to normal. However, Romai says that night is one that no one will ever forget, and it forever changed how seriously people take severe weather.
It made you more aware and aware that it could happen here.
In Beaver County, I'm KDKA First Alert Meteorologist Trey Fulbright.
The disaster victims need immediate aid, and many of you have already answered the call.
40 years ago, the heart and resilience of Western PA was on display after one of the worst tornado outbreaks to ever hit the area. Amid so much heartbreak, there was also so much help.
When you find your kitchen in your field, you go and you find that everybody's donated, and it really helps out.
Yeah, in the days and weeks that followed that outbreak, on May 31st, 1985, people everywhere pitched in to help the survivors.
However, the relief efforts at a small church at a small town in Venango County actually went on for years. In the final part of our look back, KDKA First Alert meteorologist Trey Fulbright paid a visit to that church and talked with some of the people who were part of that mission.
Northwest PA was hit the hardest in the 1985 tornado outbreak, with several violent tornadoes ravaging Mercer, Venango, Crawford, Erie, and Forest counties. We went to Coopertown in northern Venango County to learn about how that community was impacted and how a local church stepped up to meet the immediate needs of its community.
The kids and I laid on the floor, and just all you could do was just pray, hope that it was going to be over soon.
Joseph Martin is the former pastor at Coopertown United Methodist Church. He and his wife were sent to do ministry in Coopertown in June 1984. A year later, on May 31st, 1985, the night an F4 tornado struck Cooperstown, they were in Pittsburgh.
So we got a telephone call from one of her relatives and said, hey, there was a terrible tornado up in Cooperstown. And my wife related to her. And we're here in Pittsburgh right now. We started off first thing in the morning. We got instructions not to come in that night because we'd never get through in the dark and the destruction. So he came next morning.
Esther Scholm is a member of Coopertown United Methodist Church and has lived in Coopertown for years. She was at work in the local hospital when the tornado hit.
All the trees were gone. Everything was gone afterwards.
Look on the opposite hill over there. It looks like it just shot right up over there.
The houses that we knew were gone, and you know, one house survived, but it was moved off the foundation, and people were hurt. You know, it's not really something that you want to live through.
When the Martins returned to Coopertown the following day, they realized the survivors were going to need help getting back on their feet and saw an opportunity for their church to serve.
They needed gasoline money, they needed propane money, they needed food money. And we strictly operated with vouchers and cash. And that's how we worked over all those years. It's how we did it.
The church received an outpouring of supplies.
We needed toiletry supplies, toothbrush, toothpaste, those kind of things, soap, washcloths, because people didn't have houses, nowhere to go. What could they do? And we got an abundance of that, and we had that for the longest time, copious amounts of those supplies that people needed instantly. Not in a week, not in a day, not in 12 hours, right now.
The disaster response ministry at Coopertown United Methodist Church went on for 3 years, and even though it's now been 40 years since the destruction and devastation, the memories, impact, and lessons learned from that day still linger here.
Nobody has ever forgotten the date, because a lot of times you forget the date, but nobody has ever forgotten May 31st, 1985.
And there's more to life, and there's more to your living. It's what you do with what God has given you and what the nature of your life exists, and it's not material. Everybody found that out. When you lose everything that's material, you realize if that's what I've been chasing, it's not going to work.
For KDKA-TV News, I'm First Alert Meteorologist Trey Fulbright.